Welcome to Zombie City Tours. Advanced civilizations used to live where you live. The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight. Our ancestors were pyramid builders, experts at transporting and building with heavy stone, aka masonry. Their faces and their logos are engraved in stone all over our cities, and their pyramids still surround us. Now here's some more ridiculous claims. There's a single God that created you, me, the world, and all things in it, and he created a specific location of land that he deems better than all other locations of land, and he promised this land to a man named Abraham and all his children for forever. This is why we've all heard the phrase the promised land. And the land we currently call USA is the land God promised to Abraham, and our cities and our mountains are actually the proof of it. And God promises that it will remain the most blessed land on earth as long as its inhabitants follow Jesus Christ. And if they don't, it gets cursed, destroyed, and given away to somebody else. So let's look at the fruits. Is the most choice land prospering, or is it being deteriorated and given away? If you're curious, enjoy the vids. If you're not, I'm sure I'll hear from you in the comments telling me how dumb I am. Either way, dig deeper, explore your city, and most importantly, explore your God. Ask him questions and study his word. Welcome zombies to Hartford, Connecticut. Welcome zombies. Today we're taking a look at Hartford, Connecticut. Hartford is the capital city of Connecticut, so we'll look at the Capitol building, of course, because the Capitol buildings are some of the most marvelous old world architecture that exists in the country. And we're also going to be specifically looking at some of the symbols on some of these castle, old world, palace type structures. And these symbols that are on these buildings, there could be millions and billions of different varieties of symbols that could be all over these stone buildings, engraved permanently in stone. But for some odd reason, they're all a perfect match for the symbols that are laid out in the Old Testament, in the scriptures, in the book of law, as it's oftentimes called. So we're going to be looking at these symbols and looking at some of the scriptures from the word and seeing how they are an exact match. And Hartford right here is on the very east coast of the United States of America, and it's a pretty small little state, as you can see right here. When you get to the east coast, they're all quite a bit smaller, and it's basically pretty close to the middle of Connecticut. And this old stone architecture is connected to the ancient covenant that God made with Abraham, Jacob, whose name got changed to Israel, Joseph of Egypt, and then also Lehi, which is who the Book of Mormon talks about, because in 600 BC it was prophesied that there would be a remnant that escapes from Jerusalem before it gets destroyed. That's what the Book of Mormon is about. It's about that family, that remnant, that seed of Jacob, that seed of Joseph that escaped out of Jerusalem and was brought to the promised land covenant location that was promised to Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. And so that's why all this old world architecture, all this stone masonry architecture has all these ancient symbols on it that are a match from the Old Testament, because this architecture is connected to that ancient covenant with Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, and Lehi. And the images that were shown of the Bible stories and the Book of Mormon stories nowadays is poor dirt rag people, not advanced, didn't have machinery, didn't have advanced tools, and that's all lie and deception. Because if you actually read the scriptures and what the verses are actually saying, it's describing over and over and over again advanced, prosperous stonemasons. Even says they had machinery, but we just aren't actually in the word reading these things for ourselves. We're listening to all these other people talk to us about what it says instead of actually reading it for what it says. And so I'd highly recommend watching on this channel right here, the We Zombie Rod of Iron channel, a playlist that I call The Stone Woman. It's 12 videos long, and it's very in-depth, and it's pulling up all the scriptures, and it's showing over and over and over again, these were advanced stonemasons, these were advanced stonemasons, and these are the symbols that they put on their buildings. And this is the materials that they used along with all the stone. And when you read those verses and you look at all this ancient old architecture, exact match. Well, how could that be true when they say that all these buildings were built in the 1700s and the 1800s, and they have the architects and where all the stone came from, and all that's just made up? It's all a lie. And that's the ancient conspiracy that started with Lucifer and Cain Cain slaying Abel, kill, steal, plunder, pillage, and lie. That's the ancient conspiracy, and that's exactly what they do with this architecture that's connected to the ancient covenant that God made with Abraham. They pillage the architecture because there's amazing materials and very valuable gold, silver, copper, brass, iron, ziph, precious stones, a whole lot of other things. And they also demolish and strip a lot of the buildings, and then they just lie about it. They make up new stories about the architecture, and they lie to us about what it actually is. And on top of that, we're never taught anything about stone masonry, and nothing built nowadays is stone masonry, so that we don't have knowledge about stone masonry, so we don't look at these buildings and see them for what they actually are. So the first building we'll look at right here is what's called the Woodsworth Athenium. It is this castle architecture right here. And one of the main things they do with this architecture is they say it was built insanely fast. So right here you'll see founded in 1842, opened in 1844. 2 years, they're saying 2 years to get this thing built in a time period where they've got dirt roads, rickety wood wheels with a couple horses, and you're just not moving this much weight around. Nowadays, it's one of the main reasons why we don't build with heavy materials nowadays. We build with very light stick frame stuff because it's much easier to transport it, because it's much lighter. When it gets, the heavier things get, especially when you're talking about 10, 20, 40,000 pound stones, it becomes impossible to transport that type of weight on dirt roads and without proper machinery and advanced transportation. And so just the stories about this stuff is just lies. And to say they did it in 2 years when it would have been impossible for them to actually do it back then, but they did it in 2 years, it really just like breaks your brain, because it's such a bold lie. It's like, well, there must be something I don't understand. No, you're just being lied to. It's actually like that. It's just a lie. And then they also say it's ancient Egyptian styled architecture right here. And that's part of the Book of Mormon, this remnant that escaped out of Jerusalem that the Book of Mormon's all about. When you go to the second verse of the Book of Mormon, it says, I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians, because this is a family that escaped out of Jerusalem, and they were writing things. Their language was in the language of the Egyptians, and their architecture was very much also in the style of Egyptians. So that's why all this architecture, that's what we're seeing, is it's very heavily Jewish and Egyptian influenced, not influenced, it is that architecture. And the Old Testament many times is talking about the castles that they built. And right here, a distinctive castle-like building. And then if we look at the Cheney building right here, constructed 1875 to 1876, so 1 year timeline for this. And it's just completely masterful masonry. This is some of my favorite type of masonry I've seen. I'll show you some more buildings like this in just a second, but it's just incredible, beautiful stonework, and all of these pillars everywhere you look, just so many pillars. Here's another building that looks exactly in that same style in Hartford. Just amazing architecture right here. Beautiful slate roof and just a massive tower sitting on it. And then there's another one right next to it that looks like this. It's just wild. It's very look, if you're just poor people living in dirt, you're not moving this much weight around, but then it's masterfully adorned with so much style and artwork. It's really just insanity to say that all this was built without any advanced tools and without really any knowledge of how to do this stuff. And just like, look at this window. These are all marble pillars on this arched window right here. Like this is the most masterful architecture that exists in the world. And then I'll show you a couple more castles in Hartford. There's this one right here that is, I guess this is UConn, University of Connecticut right here, School of Law. It's just an old castle that's been repurposed into a University of Law now. And it really is just wild architecture right here. And there's so much of this castle stonework, this castle architecture in Hartford. I'm only just showing you a couple pieces of it right here. Look at this tower right here. Why would they have any need for building towers? And why do they need walls that are 6 feet thick of stone? And when you read the Old Testament and the Book of Mormon, it talks about people that were building towers and castles, expert stonemasons. And the people that the Book of Mormon is about, called the Nephites, they're the ones that were here in the closest time period to us. So most of this architecture is left over from them. Some of it's even older than them, back when the Israelites were inhabiting this land, because this is the land that was promised to Abraham. It's not the Middle East thing that we're told about nowadays. It's the land that's now called the United States of America. So when you read the Book of Mormon here, Mosiah 2:7 caused a tower to be erected. And when we look at some of these towers in this country, like Kansas City, Missouri right here, huge tower, and what do we see? We see robed people, like these ancient people were described, holding swords, armor of God, crown on their head. These are priests as described from the Old Testament and the Book of Mormon. Mosiah 11:12, a tower near the temple, a very high tower. Alma 46:36, upon every tower which was in all the land. Lots of towers in all the land. Alma 48:9, they did fortify and strengthen the land. Their cities were fortified, meaning they were strong structures built of super thick walls of stone. Fortified against war. Here's another castle that I found in Hartford, just looking incredibly old and perfect masterful stone masonry right here. And it has this huge copper spire on it right here, which is pretty cool. And most of this architecture is extremely buried. And so these doors right here, I would say, are not actually doors. These are old windows at the top of the structure that have actually been turned into doors. And this University of Connecticut castle right here, that is just absolute insanity. It was built between 1922 and 1926, 4 years. They were putting up full buildings with massive hundreds of feet towers of fortified stone walls real quickly back then. And there's this Hartford Public High School right here that we can see is just another piece of huge stone castle structure with some massive towers shooting off of it. And this one doesn't exist anymore, because part of what the ancient conspiracy does, Lucifer and Cain's church, they demolished this stuff. This, what they call schoolhouse, was demolished. When you put the numbers together of how many of these stone buildings they've demolished, it's in the millions. It's insanity how much has been demolished. And so if this country got started in the 1700s, we're a little over a couple hundred years later. How is it that all that was getting built and is already in the millions of it that's been demolished? The numbers don't come anywhere close to making sense. What does make a lot of sense is this architecture was already here. New people got a hold of it and they're telling us different stories about it. They're lying to us about it. This one right here, it's called the First Cathedral of St. Joseph, but it was destroyed by fire in 1956. And I read a comment from someone recently that I think is actually extremely accurate for this fire thing. And I've been thinking, when I read fire, we're talking about flames, right? Fire could be very much military fire, like guns, ammunition, blowing things up. That word can still be used in military contexts as firing squads. Things were fired at the building, not just flames. Although sometimes they do say it is like flames burning things, but destroyed by fire could very well mean destroyed by military firings. And I think that makes so much more sense when we read about all these fires over and over and over again that demolish so much of this stone architecture. Then we've got the Connecticut State Capitol right here. I made it a point to start visiting Capitol buildings. There are some other ones that are equally as nice, or at least very close to. There are some that are equally as nice, but the Capitol buildings are definitely the maximum of this stone architecture. Like, they're tremendous. The outside of them is just ridiculous, but then especially when you go in the inside and you pay attention to stuff, especially the symbols, and especially this stone woman that I'm going to show you on this building, which is what that playlist that I mentioned, like, that's definitely worth looking into. I explain who this stone woman is, and she really is a representation of the covenant that God made with Abraham and Jacob and Joseph. She is the symbol of that covenant. She is the bride of Christ. She is the symbol of his church. And if we look at this image right here, that's who's right here. All over this dome right here is insanity, this tower dome. And then she is the symbol that is encircling this entire dome. It's always a robed woman, and she's always holding different symbols that say different things about God. All perfect matches from the scriptures. Again, any symbol could potentially exist on these buildings, but for some reason it's all an exact match from the scriptures. So either these buildings are from those people in the scriptures, or someone built these buildings that we're still being lied to about. And then I kind of, the only other acceptable explanation is that those people also created some interesting book that talks about those symbols, but like that's a harder one to make sense. The one that makes much more sense is, no, this scripture thing, this Bible thing, this Jesus Christ thing is actually real, and there's a civilization that built stonework that was connected to Christ, that was connected to that covenant, and that architecture still sits here, and the symbols all over it is telling us the story, is telling us who built it, is proving us, showing us, slapping us in the face, saying, hey, this Jesus Christ thing is actually real. Like, probably pay attention to it. Some Capitol buildings still have much more of its artwork intact on the exterior and the interior, but like I said, these buildings get pillaged and stripped and eventually demolished. And you can see right here just a little bit of evidence of that. I was just reviewing some of my photos, and then I looked at this Wikipedia page, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I just saw in my photos that all these faces right here are gone. And that's exactly correct. When we look at this photo right here, all these empty circles right here is where those stone heads used to be. Been stripped off, been pillaged off, been demolished, been removed. And it's, for some of these structures, it's little by little stuff's getting stripped and demolished. Across hundreds of years it's been happening. And in other times it's like, nope, we're just fully demolishing this one. I don't know how they make up their mind about what they can do or not do, or what they want to do, or I don't know. I'm not on their team, not trying to be on their team, but it's very obvious that that's what they do. And right here we can see these have all just been, all the heads that were used to be here, these ones right here, they're gone now. They're not up there anymore. And also right here at the very top of the steeple on top of the dome, there used to be another stone woman up there, but she got taken down, and they call her the Genius of Connecticut. She's the bride of Christ. She's the symbol of his church. She's the symbol of the covenant that he made with the 12 tribes of Israel. And she's always robed. Here she's got a crown on her head, and she also has wreaths in her hand. And wreaths is another symbol straight from the Old Testament. 2 Chronicles 4:12, wreaths to cover the pommels of the chapters which are on top of the pillars. 2 wreaths, 2 rows of pomegranates on each wreath. Pomegranates is another fruit that's constantly showing up on these symbols engraved permanently in stone on these structures. Again, could be any symbol, but they're all perfect match from the Old Testament. 1 Kings 7:17, wreaths of chainwork. Right here, this is where it says the building's dome originally had a large statue on top named the Genius of Connecticut, which was taken down in 1938 after being damaged in the Great Hurricane of that year. The statue was cast in bronze from a plaster original and was 17 feet tall and weighed 7,000 pounds. So these non-advanced living in dirt pilgrims back then made a 7,000 pound robed woman out of bronze and put her all the way on top of this up here. And also all of these statues, which probably are similar in weight also, on top of this insanely huge castle structure. go inside of these buildings and look up at these domes, man, these domes are something special. I think these are much closer to the altars that the Masons in the Old Testament were building. Noah built an altar, Abraham built an altar, Moses built an altar, Joshua built an altar, King Saul built altars. All of them. They were expert Masons, and they were building altars. And we're depicted, we're shown nowadays, Bible imagery is, oh, these were poor dirt people, and if they built an altar, it was a little stone bench. No. Masterful architecture, masterful masonry, and I think that's what we're looking at when we're looking up at these domes, which is just insanity to look at. I think we're talking about Old Testament altars. And they say that the Capitol building was built from 1871 to 1878. 7 years isn't a short amount of time, but this isn't getting built in 7 years with no power tools and no proper transportation and no paved roads. It's just not happening. It doesn't add up. The math don't math. And the only other really explanation that's given, and by the way, I talk about this in the Stone Woman presentation, but she has her feet on the firmament right here. That's what this is depicting. I talk about all that in the Stone Woman presentation, but the only other explanation they really give for this robed woman being everywhere is, oh, they just had an obsession with Greek mythology. They just make up stories for what she actually is and what these buildings actually are. But when you go to the scriptures, this is what it says. Isaiah 54:5, thy maker, the creator, God, is thine husband, putting us in the wife position. Jeremiah 3:14, I am married unto you. He's the husband, his church, the tribes of Israel is his wife. Malachi 2:14, referring to his church, the tribes of Israel, as the wife of the covenant. Ephesians 5:24 says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ, the husband, has loved the church, his wife. Revelation 21:2, talking about a bride being adorned for her husband. The bride being the church, adorned for her husband, Christ. Revelation 21:19, the bride, the Lamb's wife. The Lamb is Jesus Christ. He's the husband, the wife, the bride is the church. And our government, it's very obvious nowadays, they're not about God at all. They're about the other God, the Lucifer, the devil God. And so they're just telling stories about all this ancient architecture that's connected to God. That's proof of his covenant with his church, with the 12 tribes of Israel. And then you also have the old state house right here, this building, and on top of it, there she is again, stone woman, engraved in gold this time, blurry, but in one hand she has the balances of equity and justice, which that's God. He's the one that balances the scales. And then also the sword of truth in one hand. And then there's this structure right here, which they now call the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. Again, just making up a new story for this ancient architecture. If we look in the dead center of it, right here, there's the stone woman, the robed woman, sitting on a throne. She's holding wreaths in her hand, and she has at her feet some wreaths and a shield, all just 100% Old Testament symbology. And here's what it looks like now from far away. There's a black paved road there, and this used to not be a road. And this right here is what it used to look like. Like this, they just demolish and cover stuff up. And one of the things the ancient conspiracy does, what that it talks about in the Old Testament, is they dry up waters and they demolish stone architecture. And that's exactly what we see right here. This water's not there anymore. This stone bridge, not there anymore. Just this structure is still there for right now, but the rest of it buried and destroyed. And then here's what they say about the central female figure in it. She represents the city of Hartford. Okay, that means nothing. This robed woman that we see everywhere else on these stone buildings all across the country. Well, when you see it here on this little thing, it's just a random woman that represents the city of Hartford. Why'd you choose a robed woman that matches the description of Christ Church and all his symbols from the Bible? Oh, this is the city of Hartford. She represents the city of Hartford. They just make up new stories. And then some other symbols engraved in stone on this structure is this man right here who is a mason. Wow, what do you know? We're talking about masons again. And he's got a trowel in his hand. And then here's another mason depicted, and you're seeing all these same tools right here. This is a mason. These were the The people that actually built this stuff were advanced masons, and they were extremely industrious. 2 Samuel 5:11 from the Old Testament, carpenters and masons. 1 King 5:17, they brought great stones, costly stones, huge stones, like big heavy stones, and you gotta have real ways of moving that weight. 1 Chronicles 29:2 talks about some of the materials that were used for King Solomon's temple, just showing these were advanced, prosperous people. And a lot of these symbols are connected to King Solomon's temple. It says, for the house of my God, gold for things of gold, silver for things of silver, brass for things of brass, iron for things of iron, wood. And then talks about the stones. It says they had onyx stones and glistering stones. They're like shining stones, stones of diverse colors, all manner of precious stones, and marble stone in abundance. Book of Mormon, we're reading the same stuff. They became exceedingly rich in gold, silver, in precious things, in fine workmanship of wood, in buildings, and in machinery. They had machinery, advanced masons with advanced machinery, and also in iron and copper, brass, steel, making all tools of every kind. Helaman 3:7, they became exceedingly expert in the working of cement. Advanced stonemasons. Helaman 6:11, they had all manner of gold, of silver, precious ore of every kind, and they were curious workmen, advanced workmen, who did work all kinds of ore and did refine it, and they did become rich. These Bible and Book of Mormon civilizations, which are the people that built this stuff, advanced, prosperous, super rich masons. And that's exactly what all this architecture looks like. It looks like advanced, super prosperous masons built it all. This huge structure right here, this is just an insurance building, but this is a insane stone, fortified stone complex right here. Like this isn't what you build if you're an insurance company. It makes no sense at all. And then right here, you've got the Connecticut State Library. And what do we see on top of the State Library? The stone woman, the robed woman holding a bunch of different symbols on both sides. And I showed you this one. I'll show you the inside of it, which is a church. And these old stone churches are almost always owned by foreign ownership, British ownership, not American owned. Here's a look at the inside of it. Just extremely beautiful architecture. Look at these stone arches on the inside right here. A type of wood, timber, lumber that we don't really use nowadays. Like our lumber's super cheap and very inferior to this type of lumber. Incredibly high ceilings. And here's a look at the interior. I mean, look at this archwork right here. And all the artwork on it too is just insanity. Again, this is all this flower work and the grapes that you see right there. This is all straight from the Old Testament, talking about King Solomon's temple, all the symbols that were used on King Solomon's temple. It's all this stuff. And it could be any type of plant, any type of fruit. There's like a few that are mentioned in the Old Testament, and those are the ones we see all over these buildings. Here's the Trinity College Chapel, just another super advanced castle right here. Massive, massive tower on it. And here's a look at the inside, same thing. Perfect, masterful stone masonry, amazing lumber at the top of it, and just incredibly high ceilings.